Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome to the Strange and Deadly Show, brought to you by Gentleman's Grindhouse Records. You know the deal by now, but I'm going to say it anyway. On this show, we discuss films on the Section 3 list related to the video Nasties. We pair up our films every fortnight based on a theme. You can find out more information about all of our podcasts over at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com. You should go there and subscribe on iTunes and via any podcatcher you might be using. I'll give you that information again and also tell you how you can get your feedback and comments over to us at the end of the show. But enough of the intro. Here we are again. My name is Chris Clayton, and who am I joined by, as always?
Tom Elliott.
Tom Elliott, old bean. How the devil have you been?
I'm doing very well. We took a week off there because I had a bit of a cold, but I'm doing okay now, so sorry for that, folks. We're back again.
We need to hear you at full strength, sir. That booming, beautiful, deep voice echoing in our brains night after night. No, it's good to hear that you're up and running again. And now and again we have to take a break. We get sick. We're human beings, Tom. They may think of us as gods, but we're not.
No, exactly. You know, we're just as fallible as everyone else.
Just as fallible as everyone else. Exactly. So, Tom, what have we got lined up on this week's show?
Well, last time was kind of rape revenge kind of deal. This time it's another rape revenge kind of deal. It's one of our themed months, or our double run of episodes with the same theme. We have a pair of films called Scream for Vengeance and Wrong Way. This is going to be a bit of a controversial one, Chris. I just got that feeling for some reason, but we will battle through. At the end of the day, we're watching films from this list.
Yeah.
And I think if this was a Tom and Chris pick your favourite films podcast, probably at least one of these films definitely wouldn't be on the list. But
Yeah.
we will get to that, and we will dissect that when we get to it. But right now, why don't you tell us about the first film, which is Scream for Vengeance?
Well, Tom, I would love to. So, Scream for Vengeance. Thank you very much to Mr. Chris Brown, of course. You guys who are listening, you've been long-time listeners, you know him well. It's Orange Monkey on Twitter. He provided us with this copy of Scream for Vengeance, so thank you very much. Took some of the difficulty of finding it out of our hands. Also known as Vengeance, it was released in 1980, directed and written by Bob Bliss, and it stars Sally Lockett as Jenny, Nicholas Jaquez as Mark, and Bob Elliott as Luke, among others. And let me read you the synopsis for this one. The Lomas family are about to get a very rude awakening as they arrive home from a night out, only to be greeted by 4 thieves: Mason, Luke, Drea, and Gandon. And he said Gandalf. Tony Lomas is coerced into taking 3 of the men over to his jewellery store, while Luke remains back at the house with Tony's tied-up wife and daughter. Things go awry quickly at home, as Luke's attempt to molest the young girl has him receiving a kick from her mother. He stabs the woman to death in a fit of rage and then takes the girl off to another room to rape her. He later receives a radio message from Mason asking him to kill the girls, and he shoots his victim dead. Meanwhile, we meet a wealthy young girl named Jenny Bradley and her prospective love interest, Mark. They're at the laundromat chatting, with Mark hoping to score a dinner date once they're done. Well, sadly, they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. As they emerge from the laundromat and head towards Mark's car, things are going nuts at the jewellery store. The boys have taken the goods from the safe and are about to move out when they push Tony and they accidentally set off the alarm. Thinking he's done it on purpose, they shoot him dead and take off. Bumping into Jenny and Mark along the way, they decide to knock Mark out and stick him in the boot of the car and kidnap Jenny too, taking Mark's car and heading off to pastures unknown. It's daylight when the 3 men, later to be rejoined by Luke, arrive at an old cabin many miles away from the city. They blindfold and gag Jenny and Mark, having discovered from Jenny's credit card and ID that she's the granddaughter of a rich senator. Feeling they can use the 2 as insurance and also claim a ransom, they keep them tied up on chairs. Leaving Drea alone to guard them while they go off to send their ransom demand, little do they know that Jenny and Mark intend to fight back. They loosen the knots on their ropes and prepare for a morning of bloodshed and carnage as the 2 plan an escape while the thieves come looking for them.
You 2 behave yourselves while you're here. Maybe you'll live to marry each other. Now we're going to record a message for your parents. Let them know you're okay, that you're here. Just say your name, your address. Tell them we've got you and your fiancée captive. Okay, go ahead. Talk. Talk!
Mark Davis sent me here. But we're okay.
Good girl. Dryer, you keep an eye on him. Ganton, Luke, you come with me. We'll go down to the highway and get to a phone, contact her family, pick up some supplies. Now you keep an eye on them. We'll be back in about an hour.
Oh, we'll have a good time.
All right, Tom. So this is the first time I've seen this one. I think the same for you, and the same with Wrong Way. What did you think of Scream for Vengeance?
Interesting one, this one. It's obviously very cheap, very shoddy in a lot of ways, rough around the edges, ropey acting, ropey script sometimes. I mean, we've got these, we'll get into the details later on, but we got this young couple, is it Mark and Jenny?
Yes.
And they meet in the laundrette at the beginning, and there's this horrible flirting scene where they're flirting with each other, and she's like, so you must be a farm boy from the country.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I am from the country, and I am a boy, but I never lived on a farm before, and just stuff like this, and it's just this really bad flirting between
Like porno acting, basically.
Yeah, kinda, and he's got the tash for it as well. So, in isolation, there's a lot that's not particularly good about it. It's very cheap, but I think it's structured quite well, in a way. It's edited fairly well, put together quite well. I think the main problem with it is it's unamazing, It doesn't rise above its cheap roots much, but I think it's put together all right, quite pacey at times and so on. So I think it's all right. I don't think I'd give it a second watch, and we'll get into the details, but that's the best I can say about it, really.
Yeah, I kind of agree with most of what you said, really. I didn't mind it. I thought it was all right. I think it... I get the feeling that there's going to be a similar pattern to this one as there was on the last show, with one film that we quite liked and then one that we maybe didn't like so much. And I don't think this is as good as Death Weekend was. That was the film that we liked from the last episode. Because it's quite rough around the edges, isn't it? It's clearly they didn't have a lot of money to make this one with, but yeah, the acting and everything is not so great. Like we say, that scene in the laundromat. I mean, it is porno acting basically.
Yeah.
But there are moments in here that I thought were pretty good. I mean, for example, one of the thieves, I think it was Luke. He's wearing a blue balaclava in the house with the Lomas family, and of course he's sort of being pervy with this young girl, and sort of he's got a knife and he's kind of stroking her skin with it, and I actually thought that was quite a creepy moment when he had the balaclava on. It's quite interesting because at first I was thinking, are these guys actually going to be, is there going to be bloodshed in this at all, or are they just guys who are looking for money and they don't want to hurt anybody? But actually they're pretty scummy guys, really, and bad dudes all around, I would say. It's a very, very, very flawed movie, but I do think they're trying. I think they're trying with a clearly very limited resources, and I think they sort of succeed in a few parts. I would say I think some of the scenes drag on far too long, and perhaps we can get into that and see if you share that view or not. But I do think some of it's a bit too dragging. There were a couple of times where I was like, okay, I mean, this is only 90 minutes long, but it felt a bit longer than it perhaps should have. But overall, I thought it was okay. We've seen much, much worse than this.
That scene that you talk about with one of the hoodlums in the house quite early on, we've got the mum and the daughter tied up there. And you're right, it is quite uncomfortable because it goes on for a while, doesn't it? He's sort of, slowly undoing her clothing, and he's whispering all the time to her, it's okay,
Yeah.
just gotta unbutton this here, and so on, and it goes on, and it is quite uncomfortable, and it gets a bit worse before it gets better, to be honest. But yeah, they are quite a nasty bunch. But in the beginning, like you, I thought they were going to be all right, because one of them says to like the dad who had the shop that they wanted to rob, he says, look, we've got masks on so you don't see our faces. You just go along with this, nobody gets hurt. And for a moment there, I kind of believed him, but it wasn't to be.
Because you get a film now and again where you've got kidnappers, for example, and at first they seem like really bad guys, and perhaps they are to some degree, but you come to sympathise with them. Perhaps you have a character who's quite strong, and you think this guy's sort of likable. Maybe he's in a difficult situation. So I was wondering very early on, as you say, maybe they're going to be all right guys who are just, they're still doing a bad thing, but they're not. They don't mean to harm anybody. But no, they are, truly despicable guys. Not as despicable as the guys who are going to be in our next movie, but they're pretty scummy guys nonetheless, who are clearly only interested in money and girls, pretty much. And so it's interesting, because I was thinking at the beginning, well, is the whole movie going to be about this family, these three people? Is it going to be a sort of almost a home invasion kind of thing? And actually, it isn't really. The family are essentially victims, and we start from that early point there where Luke stabs the mother and kills her, and then of course he goes off and rapes the girl. You don't see the rape, which I think is, again, the power of suggestion. It can be powerful, where we see, later on when is it Mason, I think, has sort of called him up on the radio and said, look, you kill the girls, because they've already killed Tony, the father. Kill the girls, and we just see the girl sort of laying there naked, and she's been, she's humiliated, and she's been raped, she's been used, and then he just shoots her dead, and it's I thought was quite an effective thing. We didn't really need to see a graphic rape scene in order for us to understand what had happened. So I quite enjoyed that. But I was wondering at this point, well, how are Jenny and Mark going to intersect with this? And they do in an interesting way, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They do. Quite at random, just by chance, they're coming out the jewellery shop, and there they are, and they get taken hostage, and they get tape over their eyes and their mouths, which is a horrible thing. I hate the thought of having tape over my mouth like that. It just makes me feel quite claustrophobic. And the thing is, as well, Mark has got this, magnificent moustache. It's like an eagle spreading his wings across his face. And I kind of hoped when they pulled the tape off that he'd be clean shaven and the moustache would be still on the tape, but unfortunately it never happened.
You stole exactly what I was going to say after you mentioned that. Damn it, Tom. But you're right. I was hoping they yanked it off really quickly. And because it is, as you know, guys, you guys listening out there, I'm speaking to you, we like a good moustache on this. And fortunately, we get to see a lot of films that come from this particular period when the magnificent, as you say, eagle spreading its wings moustache look was very popular. So Mark definitely has it. But yeah, you're right. Wrong place, wrong time, right?
Well, absolutely. And they get bundled into the car and taken off to some little hideaway out in the forests, and put in a room, tied to chairs. And then that's where the second half of the film really kicks into gear. Now, we've spoke about revenge films before. I don't really see this as a revenge film either, to be honest. It's more of a fight for survival film. But, they're there in this house looking for their opportunity to escape, which eventually they get, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, that really their only goal is to escape, and it just so happens that these guys are trying to track them down. So like you say, they're not trying to take vengeance on anybody. They're trying to survive. And they're trying to get away. And it essentially, I suppose, becomes a bit of a chase movie, really. I think that it's interesting. Mark is an interesting character. He's the everyman character, because he's not like a big tough guy, is he? He's not trying to be, what's his name from the film that we really like. That we didn't love the film, but we loved his character. What was his name now? Newman. There you go.
In Aftermath.
Yeah, Aftermath. That's it. Yeah, Newman. He's not a Newman where, because he's a fallible sort of hero, really. He's only known Jenny for a matter of hours, really. I mean, you could. No, the word "no" there I put in quotes, because really they only spoke in the laundromat for about half an hour, 40 minutes or so, and then they're suddenly bungled into a car together. But they develop a bond quite quickly, don't they?
They do, yeah. And just for the record, no one's like Newman. If you try and put tape over Newman's moustache, it would probably burn through the tape or something. I don't know.
Yes, his face would explode, Tom.
you know, they form this bond, and I suppose it's based on decency, really. You know, they're in that situation, and he's a decent guy. He's not a very good flirt, but they're in this situation, and you would hope that if you were in that situation as well, being a decent person, you would do the same, just try and help the other person out.
Yeah, I think that's what I came away from, because when the film started and we met those characters, I thought Mark was going to be a bad guy. I thought he was in there and he was going to, because he was sort of eyeing her up a bit, wasn't he? And I was thinking, oh, is he going to start messing with this young girl? But not at all. He's a decent, sort of respectable guy. And again, there's a little bit of realism to this in that he's not just some big sort of burly hero guy. I mean, he is like I said, a fallible hero. So what we get here is essentially, the other guys have all gone off to send off the ransom. They made a little recording of Jenny saying, we're here, we're kidnapped or whatever. And what happens is they end up, somehow escaping. They end up sort of untying the knots of the rope that are obviously tying their hands together, and they manage to get hold of a gun, and they manage to shoot Dreyer, so he's gone. And as they manage to get into, I think it was Luke's truck, and they manage to start driving away. They don't know where they are because they've been, Jenny was in the back of the car, and of course she's got the tape over her eyes and mouth. Mark was in the car boot, so so they don't know where they are. All they can see is a lot of shrubbery, a lot of bushes and a lot of dirt, and so they're driving away, and they just happen to pass the car that of course has the three other guys in it, and a shootout takes place, and they sort of very quickly realise why these guys, here they are, they're out in the open, let's track them down. And essentially what happens then is that it's a case of them trying to get away and the other guys catching up to them.
Yeah, it's an extended kind of chase through the woods. I don't know, I think I was starting to lose interest a little bit by this point. I don't think it's bad, it's just unamazing, you know what I mean? It's like, if you want to watch a film of this type, there's probably much better examples of them out there, so this wouldn't be my choice. But it was okay, but I think my attention was starting to waver a bit by this point.
Yeah, do you think there are any strong characters in this?
I don't personally think so. I don't think Jenny is particularly anything, really. I mean, Mark, he has the whole moustache thing going for him, but I don't think they're particularly strong, no. I mean, how about you?
No, you need more than a moustache, Tom, to excel in life. No, I agree, really. I didn't think anybody particularly stood out. I mean, Mark, I suppose, just because he's the more assertive of the two. Jenny's quite sort of shrieky, isn't it? She really nowhere near as bad as the girl in Demented. Let me say that immediately. Not annoyingly so, but really a sort of exactly. Really, I don't know if you heard Tom just whispering "God" under his breath there. It's not a particularly great character, and I would have to say, of course, we kind of praised Death Weekend on the last episode, where I think some of the scumbags in that, they are quite sort of individual, and of course, I've got a terrible memory at the moment. What's the name of the bad guy in that?
Oh, don't put me on the spot like that.
Lip, Kip, Whip, whatever his name is, something like that. But he really stood out, and even though the other guys weren't quite as strong, they still were sort of individual. Whereas these bad guys, no real personalities, I think.
And I think that might be our problem here, because the thing is put together fairly well, but the heroes are quite bland, the baddies are quite bland. I mean, they're nasty in the things that they do, but there's no standout characters that you really love to hate because of their character. So I think this might be why it's just kind of slipped away into obscurity, Yeah, it's put together quite well, but not really that memorable about it.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, a good word for it is acceptable. It's acceptable. You're not going to watch this and be offended by it, even though, some of the acting's a bit ropey, but in general, there's nothing that's terribly offensive about it. It doesn't really stand out that much. It's just, it's okay. It's an acceptable thing, and we have to say, I mean, going through the plot, of course, really what it's all building up to, I think, is the ultimate confrontation between Luke and Jenny and Mark. I mean, Mark can take an incredible amount of damage, can't he? Because at one point in this movie, towards the end, he gets shot in the back But he still keeps rolling. I mean, that's the thing, you got to give credit to Mark. He keeps his strength up, and I mean, should we talk about the ending, or did you have anything else you wanted to bring up first?
No, we might as well. This is quite a quick review, but I think this is just the nature of the film. There's nothing to really latch on to that much.
Yeah, so essentially the ending of it is that Mark has gone off to try and get some help from somebody, see if he can find a farm or something, and he manages to find that. He leaves Jenny inside this old barn and leaves her with a gun. Two guns, in fact. And essentially what happens is Luke manages to find Jenny. First, before that happens, he sees Mark climbing up this little sort of ridge, and he shoots him in the back, and you think, that's it, that's the end of Mark, because he looks pretty dead, I have to be honest, at the end of it. But then he manages to find Jenny inside this cabin. And Jenny, now, to be completely fair to her, she probably not fired a gun before in her life.
No.
But she's not good aim, is she, Tom?
She isn't a good aim at all, no. Bless her, but she tries. That's the main thing.
Yeah, really, really not a good aimer at all. And they have a little battle, and you think, what's going to happen here? Because Mark is dead. Who's going to help Jenny? But at the last moment, Mark, with a little bit of strength he has left, he brings in a pitchfork, Tom, and he stabs old Luke in the tummy, which is actually the cover of it's the cover on the VHS release of it. So so if you want a good spoiler before you watch the movie, that guy's going to die at the end of it with a pitchfork in his stomach, and that's sort of the end of it. And I think it's we get a little hopeful scene at the end, don't we, where we can see that, well, Jenny's okay, and actually Mark is alive. He hasn't died at the end of it, and he's probably going to be okay. So there's a hopeful uptick at the end of it.
Yeah, which is quite rare, I suppose, in some of these downbeat films that we've been watching lately, that actually there's a bit of hope, and maybe they'll have a second date after this as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd like to imagine they would do, Tom, when they get married someday. I think that would be a lovely thing to want for them. But that's really it, isn't it, Tom? There's not a tremendous amount to say, because you've seen all this stuff done before. You've seen it done better. But what's here is not terrible by any means.
I'm struggling now, because I think I've said it all, and like I say, I think that's the film we're dealing with. Just very unmemorable, unamazing in a lot of ways, but competently done. It's done on the cheap, but they do well with what they have. But I just can't really get excited about it.
Yeah, they're trying, Tom. I think that's the thing we can take away from this. They are trying, and I don't know if they're quite succeeding. But I've seen far worse than this. But like I say, I've seen much better as well. So it just depends really on your patience for this sort of thing. I can sort of understand why this is the sort of film nobody's rushing to restore this, because it just is sort of where it's it's in a sea of other films that are worse than it, that are the same as, and that are as better, or better than it. So yeah, nothing to write home about really. But I didn't hate that I was watching it. I do think some of the scenes drag on a bit too long, and that's a real negative for me. Like you said, really, at the beginning of your review, I can't see myself watching this again.
That might very well be our fastest ever Strange and Deadly review.
It's possible, but again, not because we disliked it, just because it's a bit it is what it is. Yeah. Well, Tom, shall I tell everybody how they can get hold of the movie?
Please do.
Well, Scream for Vengeance does not appear to have had an official DVD release. There are VHS rips floating around the internet, in addition to bootlegged DVDRs that you can purchase. Seems to be the way of things at the moment here on the Strange and Deadly show. We sort of reached that little cachet of films that are so obscure that nobody's bothered to actually officially release them on anything apart from VHS. So, an interesting thing, if you want it, it is out there for you. But I don't know. I mean, you don't want to be paying much for it, because it's not. I don't think it's good enough to demand that.
So, should we take a look at our second film, Wrong Way?
Fine.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you about this one, Chris. And it's called Wrong Way, and our thanks to our friend Smodge for providing us a copy of this one.
Yeah, thanks, Smodge.
It's also known as Bad Scene and The Hitchhiker, released in 1972, directed by Ray Williams, but the writers are unknown. They don't want to be known,
Probably,
I don't think. Starring a bunch of people. And It goes something like this. Kathy and Nancy are on a road trip through the country when their car breaks down and they're left by the side of the road. It just so happens they're found by a couple of rednecks who belong to a bigger gang, and they're out to kidnap girls. They devise a quick plan upon spotting the girls, and they stop under the pretense of offering help. Managing to get the girls into the car, their ruse is soon broken when they meet up with the rest of their friends. Stripping the girls naked, they proceed to rape them over and over again, as the girls helplessly give in. When the rednecks are finally done, they pack themselves back into their car and head off, laughing and singing as they go. The girls, though dazed, put their clothes back on and head off in search of civilization. Kathy's father is concerned as to her whereabouts. She hasn't made contact in far too long, so he convinces the local sheriff and his partner to investigate. The sheriff finds fragments of Kathy's camera at the location they were raped, and later finds a pair of panties on the rocks near some water where the girls had once been to wash. It seems that trouble is still to come for Kathy and Nancy, however, as they happen upon a strange hippie cult who are in the process of burying a dead man. The cult's leader is a strange theatrical man. The cult discovers the girls and kidnaps them, forcing them to join their tribe. We cut away to an unrelated event with two men who are going to sell a young girl for heroin. They proceed to have sex with her. The film concludes as they meet with the sheriff and are forced into a deadly gunfight.
Marshal Anderson's office.
This is George Hendrick speaking.
Oh, hi, George. How are you? Been a long time. How's everything going?
I don't know. My wife is terribly worried about our daughter Kathy and her friend Nancy Newbar. Frankly, I'm worried too.
What seems to be the problem?
Well, the girls called in this morning from Norton Corners. Kathy said they would be leaving immediately and would be home within the hour. That was 4 hours ago.
Well, George, I wouldn't worry too much if I were you. After all, Kathy is a big girl, and she's very dependable.
That's just it, Henry. Kathy is a dependable girl. And if she decided to stay in Norton Corners, she would have called back. And if she left Norton Corners, then she would have been here hours ago.
I know, but there is only one route between there and here, you know, unless, of course, she could have, she could have taken that old abandoned road. It's not used much anymore.
You mean the old Sadler Wells Road? Well, Kathy is a great one for taking shortcuts. It would be just like her to have taken that old road.
I see. Well, George, hold on just a minute, will you? I'm going to have to get a little more information here, okay? Just a minute.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to stand back a fair distance and have a listen to your review of Wrong Way.
Smodge, you dickhead. Oh dear. I think, Tom, I would quite like to eradicate the male species from the earth. And now I realise, of course, if I do that, that's going to be you and I gone. But we have to be sacrificed for the good of humankind. I'm willing to go there for that. Wrong Way. It is absolutely loathsome and vile and disgusting, misogynistic, irritating, insulting, really, really, really fucking shit as well, let's be honest.
Yeah.
This is... Now, look, I don't... You know, I'm not trying to cover myself in hyperbole. I think this is the worst film we've covered on this show. And now you may make arguments, of course. You may say, well, look, this one, or you know, one of the cannibal ones we reviewed back at the beginning of us starting this whole thing is, and yes, that is true. We've reviewed some really, really terrible movies on this, but I think this might be perhaps the first movie that is absolutely pointless. Because it exists only to demonstrate that the filmmakers or filmmaker... I don't actually know the names of the crew on this thing, or how many people were involved in filming it, of course, because there are only two names that are available in regards to the production of this, and one is Ray Williams and the other is Ron Kelly, I think. And as far as I can tell, they're both the same person. So, so as far as I know, only one person was involved in the production of this. Probably not true, but that's all I can find that's linked to this. When Tom read out the thing where he said this is starring a bunch of people, the reason I put that in the notes is because on IMDb, none of the actors are linked to the names of their characters on there, so I don't know who is who. Truthfully, and that's why I said a bunch of people, because I don't know. Tom, this is vile stuff, really, really vile stuff, and you might sit there and think, well, is it really that bad? It's so hateful towards women in a really disgustingly loathsome way that makes me want to, get the baseball bat out and go around their house. What do you think?
I liked it. No, I'm only messing.
You bastard. Don't play with my feelings like that, Tom.
One of our listeners, Teresa, wrote on Twitter, "I hope the person who made Wrong Way is dead, and if they're not, then I will happily go and kill them myself."
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, at the time, I hadn't seen the film, so I kind of just, had a little chuckle and went along my way. But
okay, Frank Castle needs to get hold of these fuckers.
Yeah, I think I agree. The thing is, I mean, rape, it's a tricky one in films sometimes. I mean, we're not fans of the rapey stuff, but sometimes, I mean, there's films like I Spit on Your Grave, and it's hard to say I like it, but I do find the revenge aspect of it extremely satisfying after what she's been through. So whether it's justified in being there is always going to be a conversation for people to have. Does it need to be that graphic? Does it really need to be there? The director might say, oh, it's an empowering film for women, but I guess only women can really make that choice as to whether it is or not. There's always going to be this conversation of, is it justified putting it in there, or is it purely just for sickos to get their rocks off? There's no conversation with this film. It's just for sickos to get their rocks off. That's what it is. Wrong Way. It is loathsome. It is disgusting. It is horrible. Any words you can think of applies to it. I think the only saving grace, and it is a small one, is that it's so poorly done that I don't think the rape scenes are as impactful as something like I Spit on Your Grave, because they're just so terribly made. But it's more the intent that I find so loathsome, that it is made for people to sit and get their rocks off looking at naked women being raped. It's horrible.
I think that in many of the rape revenge movies that we've sat through, which, like we say, I'm never going to be a fan of that. Really not the kind of thing I go out of my way to watch when I'm not doing this show, basically. We have to cover these films because they're on the Section 3 list, and of course we have to expose ourselves to them. But I think in many of the rape revenge movies that we watch, there is that element of the rape being quite a disturbing aspect of it. Whereas here, I really feel like they're reveling in it. They're really enjoying playing out these scenes and making them linger for as long as possible. It's a really, really badly made movie. You mentioned it just there, but I mean, it's inept filmmaking, terribly edited, really, really badly edited. I think the version of the film that we've got, I'm not positive on this because, again, it's a very obscure movie, but I think the version we've got is the BBFC version that has about 15 minutes cut out of it.
Really?
So I can only imagine what the BBFC saw fit to remove from this, because it must have been. I mean, I think what's here is already bad enough. You may be wondering out there, if you've not seen this and you have no intention of seeing it, or you've got no way of tracking it down somehow, you may be thinking, well, why are they so offended by this? The problem is that first of all, this is not a rape revenge movie. It's not a revenge movie at all. But what it boils down to is, from what I can tell, looking at IMDb, it seems like almost, I would say 99% of the people who were in this film never did anything else again. Understandable, of course, but they never did any other work. And I think it's because I get the feeling that pornography was kind of the main aim here, and they didn't quite stretch to hardcore, but they were getting quite close to it, and they wanted to make something that they felt was quote unquote titillating. There's that scene in the beginning where we've got one of these fucking disgustingly vile redneck characters, totally irredeemable people. I mean, really, really, really irredeemable. But he has this sort of, he's smoking a joint, and he has this scene, if you remember it, where there's this naked girl who's kind of gyrating, and she's got these stars over her nipples and a hat on and everything, and it's all meant to be like, oh, look at women, aren't they? They're ours to be gawked at, to be commodities for us men, aren't we great? And it's like, well, no, actually, we're not, and they don't deserve to be seen that way. And this is what this film revels in, is that the female form is something great to look at, and therefore we should exploit it as much as we possibly can. And really, I was already not enjoying the movie, but I think it's fair to say, Tom, where we need to place a lot of focus is on the extended rape scenes that are in this, where they're really long and lingering, and like you say, not particularly well shot, so therefore you don't really feel as much of an impact as you would do. But I still found myself, I mean, this is probably the most difficult time I've had with one of the movies on our show, of just trying to get through it, because I got about halfway through and I was like, I've got to stop for a while and just think about my life.
It's strange, really, isn't it, that we, a pair of guys who like a bit of blood and guts, like a bit of gore, and I've said several times in the past, you know, I like a bit of sleaze as well. I'm not going to lie, that it makes me sound like some kind of dirty old man. I don't sit there, you know, spanking away to sleazy films, but there's a certain vibe about some films that I just like, and this is what we tend to deal in with a lot of these Section 3 movies and movies that I'll watch in my own time. You know, there is a certain kind of sleaze that I like, but it's like what the line is between good sleaze and bad sleaze, I don't know. I guess it's going to be different for everybody, isn't it? I'll try and think of an example of good sleaze before the end of the podcast. But what makes this one so irredeemable is like I said, the intent. You know, a film like, and I'll mention it again, I Spit on Your Grave, it hurts you, the viewer, to watch it going on. It hurts what this woman goes through. And I'm not saying this doesn't hurt, watching what these girls go through on this, but it's made so poorly, so ineptly, that it doesn't have that same impact. But like I said before, what really makes me sick is that there's guys behind this, and they're just like, right, okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's get them on their knees now. Yeah, let's get them on their knees and get the guys lining up and, you know, orally rape them for a bit. Let's do that next. Yeah, okay. And I'll tell you what, we'll put one of the girls on the car bonnet for a while. You know, it is just purely about trying to titillate with rape, and it's just, I mean, even before the rape stars, it was terrible. You mentioned that scene with the cowgirl.
Yeah.
You know, a guy takes one toke on a joint and he's hallucinating a cowgirl, a naked cowgirl. Man, that must be some good shit he's smoking. But you know, and there's a scene where the girls sort of, you know, change their clothes by the side of the road, by their car, and they're topless for a sec.
For no reason. But
stuff like that, I think, is par for the course for these films, and you can debate whether that's okay or not, but that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, you know, that's where we are. That's the kind of film I'm watching. But then it just took it to this ridiculous level. I don't know.
Yeah, I think people can be quite quick to label a film misogynistic if there's, you know, we see it a lot with some of the slasher movies from, of course, the early to mid 80s, where predominantly the victims are females. But this is the first film that I've seen in a long time where I really feel like it is misogynistic, that the people who made this really do think of women as just objects. And I think maybe it could have been slightly redeemed if... the girls are terrible actresses anyway. Nobody in this is good at all. Nobody. No. Everybody's really, really terrible. I mean, this makes fucking Headless Eyes look like Inception. You know what I mean? It just is. You know, it's not well acted. I think that because is it Camille Keaton, who was the main actress in I Spit on Your Grave, who I think is, again, you know, a little unsure at times, but I think for the most part is you really feel that there's a drive and a determination to get revenge. She becomes this sort of, you know, she becomes a sort of warrior, if you like, a sort of almost an Amazonian kind of warrior. But here the girls, they don't seem to be terribly upset about it after it happens. They're not acting very well, and you sort of think, okay, well, maybe it would be slightly redeemed if there was some sort of revenge, but it doesn't happen at all. After these redneck guys raped these girls for such a long time, used them in every despicable way possible, and it's just horrible to look at. It's detestable to the eyes, as far as I'm concerned. Unless you're unless you're completely fucked up and you're a massive pervert, none of this is going to be titillating to you whatsoever. But after that's all happened, the rednecks, they get in the car and they drive off singing, and we never see them again. They're gone. So we're thinking, well, okay, what's going to happen here? And the girls sort of walk off, and they manage to find another group of people. It's a strange thing, and they find a guy. What they find is a sort of hippie cult with a guy dressed like a shogun for some reason.
Yeah,
it never really made any sense to me. And he's the only guy in the movie who seems to think that he can act, but he's not very good. But I mean, he's better than everybody else, but he's still, you know, shite house. And then so then we get that. Then it's a subplot, if you like, because we're like, okay, well, what's going to happen to the redneck guys? Oh, we never see them again. They're gone. So I'm afraid there's not going to be any revenger happening there. We then get this little subplot where essentially this guy, I guess, is like a Charles Manson kind of figure, except, like I say, he's ostensibly dressed in his bathrobe with something tied around his head. And it's a subplot that goes nowhere at all. Absolutely nowhere. But before it can finish, I presume, I mean, I haven't read that much about this film, but I've read that apparently the film was unfinished, and then, which makes sense, doesn't it, Tom? Because that the stuff is happening with the cult, with the hippie cult, and they're like, look, because they kidnapped these girls again, like they've gone from one bad situation to another, and they said, look, we're going to make you essentially our sex slaves until we feel that we can let you go. You're going to become part of our tribes, and they've already got two other women there with them who've obviously been coerced into being part of this quote unquote tribe, and then the film cuts to a completely, it's almost a little bit like, do you remember that film Snuff? It's a really controversial film because the film essentially is a retelling of the Manson family story, but right near the end of the movie it completely changes, and they end the movie itself, and there's a scene at the end of it where they were trying to give the impression that they actually had filmed a real killing of a woman. And in actual fact, of course, it wasn't. It was something that was essentially the movie Snuff itself was just a separate movie. And then when the American distributor got hold of the movie, I think it was the American distributor, they added on this scene at the end of it because the main movie itself is rather boring and not very good. So they added on this controversial scene at the end. And I almost feel like that's slightly similar to what they've done here, in that story ends because whether they couldn't be bothered or they didn't have enough money, they decided they couldn't finish that subplot, so they just cut it, and we get a completely different scene, don't we, Tom? And what do we get here?
Well, this is almost worse in a way, because we've got these two guys in a hotel room. Are they in Vegas or something? I don't know.
I have no idea.
But they've got a young girl with, you know, a bit of a strung out junkie type of girl, and they end up raping her. And the most insulting part is they end up raping her till she likes it.
Yeah.
Just to add insult to injury. And there's talk about they're going to sell her and stuff like this. I don't know, but they rape her until she likes it, and that scene goes on and on and on for a while as well, until we get to our conclusion.
And it's essentially a porno, isn't it, at that point? I mean, that's essentially what it is. Yeah. They're not showing hardcore penetration or anything like that, but essentially it's pornography. Now I have to ask you this question, Tom. After seeing that long sort of extended rape scene earlier on in the movie, did you think it was possible for the film to get any more sleazy than it already was?
I didn't think so, but they managed to top themselves.
I wish they would. They accomplished something that I didn't think was. But they got these two greasy old dudes in there, and the one guy saying, "Oh, let me in there, honey," or whatever he's saying. It's like, oh, you vile twats. And so we get treated to that, and then it cuts again, and they're out on the roadside, and then the sheriff and his partner turn up, and then they've got the girl in the back of a trunk there. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, well, what happened to the two girls who were raped in the beginning of the movie? Well, you never see them again. The sheriff says something over the radio or something about how they ended up finding the girls, and they were okay, or they were quite shaken, they can't really speak very much, and they ended up, I don't know, shooting the family dead or something like that. But it's all told, it's all told over the radio. You never get to see that part of the story again because they never finished it. I don't know why that is, but they just never did. But we could say, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to speak to the director of this movie? You get me in the same room with the director of that movie, and I'm going to Negan him with a bat. It is... So then we get this scene, and then they have a little shootout, and then the two scummy guys get shot. The sheriff and his partner get shot, but actually they're okay. And the partner gets up and opens up the trunk, and there's the girl at the end. And it's a mess of a thing, and I just found it detestable. I really, really did. And I mean, I'm interested to see what you think as to whether this would be the case for you or not. I think this is the worst film we've covered on this, and I think it's the worst one. I think it's up there with the worst, the most ineptly made films that we've covered on this. But I think it just is because it's so unbelievably pointless and joyless and revels in it. It's leery and nasty, like it's on my skin, like it's bleh. I want to get it. I want to wash my eyeballs so that I don't have to have it stink on me. It just is a detestable piece of crap. Do you think it's the worst thing we've covered on here?
Possibly. I mean, Brutes and Savages, for the animal killing, was a bit of an ordeal as well. So I don't know whether they're on par or not. It's certainly, but in a way, it even feels more mean-spirited than that. And strange as that is to say, because at least these scenes were faked and the animal killing was real in Brutes and Savages. Quite possibly. It could be, yeah. I
mean, Brutes and Savages is fucking Taxi Driver next to this, mate. I tell you. I mean, what more can one say about this? This is absolutely... this has got to be the bottom of the barrel for me. Really. I mean, really... I did not enjoy a moment of this, and I really felt sad for the sort of two main girls in it, because I almost wonder, are they okay? Were they being treated okay? Were they taken care of? I don't know, because the filmmaker gives me the impression that he doesn't give a fuck about women.
Yeah, if this suddenly evaporated from the earth and ceased to exist, I think the human race would be much better for it.
Well, with that being said, Tom, if you guys out there, if any people feel that you want a copy of Wrong Way, as with Scream for Vengeance, Wrong Way has never had an official DVD release. Why? Well, you can find VHS rips and bootleg DVD-Rs for sale on the internet if you so desire. I'll just say this. Anybody involved with the production of this, if you happen to be listening to our show for some reason, you should take a very good leap off a very, very, very tall building, you horrible cunts.
Yes, and while you do that, why don't we take a listen to some feedback?
We have an email from Amanda Reyes at Made for TV Mayhem. Of course, we know Amanda well. She's a very good friend of the show and in real life. As she says, "Hi guys, as a horror and exploitation fan, and generally someone who can take their sleaze with a grain of salt, I still have to side with Mary Whitehouse with regards to labelling Wrong Way as some sort of nasty and hopefully hiding it from the public. I think the BBFC did us a service with that one. Now, it takes a lot to side with Mary Whitehouse, Tom. But I have to say I agree. Released the same year as Last House on the Left, I'm unsure which came first, but Wrong Way only serves to prove how incredible Craven's metaphor-filled horror film truly was, as it got that there's more to good exploitation than forcibly grinding on naked women for 20 minutes at a time while folk music drones in the background. Yet admittedly I kept watching with a kind of morbid fascination. I wondered, will there be revenge? Is there any payoff for this torture? Will this not be a complete waste of my time? But then I only got a close-up of a girl washing her crotch and more rape. Wrong Way served absolutely no purpose and was ridiculously offensive in ways I'm not sure I'd experienced before, so at least it accomplished that. However, I did kind of like that early scene with the guy fantasising about a naked female sheriff with a cardboard star taped to her breast. What on earth was that man smoking? That Tom pretty much said the same thing. My 2-word review of Wrong Way: no way. I'm really glad I watched Wrong Way first, because even if Scream for Vengeance had been absolutely horrible, there's no way it could have been nearly as bad. Luckily, it was surprisingly good. At least Vengeance has some idea of how to build suspense, and they were tasteful enough to make the rape an off-screen endeavour, for which I am eternally grateful. What I think I liked most about Vengeance was its earnest approach, a fairly simple story told with sometimes marginal acting and modest direction. You can tell there was some heart in there and that everyone was pulling their weight the best they could. I found myself really involved in the kidnapped couple's escape, although I wished they'd talked less and maybe started escaping more, and was actually really worried that one of them wouldn't make it. See, I don't ask for much in these kinds of films, and this one was a nice discovery. Yay! Faith restored in humanity again. Also, Mark is... Now here we go, we get down to the standard thing here with Amanda. We know what she's like. Also, Mark is totally my hero. Forget all the stuff I said about Don Stroud. I'm marrying this guy. He was adorable. Porno stash and all. Looking forward to your thoughts. I hope we're all Team Mark. Take care, Amanda. Thank you very much for sending that to us, Amanda.
Hello, Mr. Tom, Mr. Chris. This is Myron from Ancient Slumber Podcast, providing some audio feedback to you from your 2 movies you have reviewed. First one, Wrong Way. I made it 15 minutes in before I just turned it off. I knew it was going to get a little rapey, and the acting, as well as the filming, as well as the dialogue, as well as everything, was just so horrid I just couldn't even make it past 15 minutes. Sorry, mates. Just couldn't do it on this one. Scream for Vengeance, your next one, also known as Vengeance. I didn't make it very far in this one either, to be honest. It was the implication or the thought of the fact that rapey scene involved a 16-year-old girl. Now, obviously, she looked like 35, at least. But filmmakers did nothing to dissuade the whole potential image of a 16-year-old and then showing full frontal nudity of said potential 16-year-old. It just did it for me. There was ways they could have handled that where it didn't imply or leave anybody lingering with a 16-year-old. Not that any common sense person would, but still, it was there, and I just found it offensive. For whatever reason, it just struck me as offensive, and I just turned it off. So I can't really say much. Up to that point, it seemed to be a, well-acted, well-written type of, what you're going to get for 1979. But, at the point where it just kind of went down that road, that it just struck me as, that is, my perspective, just didn't even deserve to be continued. So, guys, I'm so sorry, but I just couldn't make it through these 2. But I'm sure you'll give them a thorough rinsing, and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Hi guys, Gorblimey here, on Twitter as @IamGorblimey. I managed to watch Wrong Way. Bloody hell, the things I watch for you. Anyway, here are some notes I took. In a nutshell, I found this to be quite a nasty, mean-spirited little film. Seems to have some real issues with women. It's like it wants to be a softcore porno full of rapey violence, but needed to throw in a bit of story to get it shown in cinemas. And I think we're talking the kind of cinemas where you'd find men in dirty raincoats. The acting is jaw-droppingly bad. Now, I love a wooden performance as much as any bad film fan, but here it was as if they grabbed anyone walking past, handed them a page of lines and told them to read it out on camera. The editing is clunky and jarring. The music ranges from excitable bongo drums to squelchy fart noises with squealing to dreary guitar ballad. The dialogue is at times bizarre. You've got a biker eating raw eggs who indicates his groin and says, "Man, I got a factory down here that makes little love torpedoes out of each one of these. I figure I got about 20 in the tube right now." The girls take a shortcut and their car breaks down in a place one describes as desolate and scary. The other says, "The world is full of creeps and this is the incubator." So they promptly strip off all their clothes. Meanwhile, we see a biker guy who's got hold of the most powerful grass in the world, one puff only, and he's hallucinating a woman standing stark naked but for a hat and a sheriff's star made of tinfoil glued to one nipple. And we get a long scene of her looking into the camera, stroking her boobs and squishing them together, which is apparently quite sexy. So, after these two totally gratuitous scenes, we know we're in for something exploitative and aimed at a particular male audience. The girls have to endure a really brutal ordeal, which goes on for over 20 minutes, and it's very horrible indeed to watch. They're humiliated, tortured with snakes, violently attacked and gang raped, and it goes on far longer than is necessary. And the way it's filmed feels like it's trying to titillate rather than shock the viewer. This came out the same year as Last House on the Left. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen that, but I'm pretty sure that film didn't try to arouse its viewers. When the girls finally get away, they quickly bump into another group of people, this time led by a man wearing a duvet cover, and have to go through another rape ordeal all over again. After this, the film suddenly switches to a completely new scene with totally different characters. Two men have drugged a woman and start to rape her. This ends after a police helicopter has spotted them. Apparently it can see inside buildings, and the men are captured and shot dead, and spoiler alert, the film ends. Now, the first story ends abruptly, and the second seems tacked on, almost as if they'd forgot to end the first one and needed something to fill up the running time. The two have absolutely nothing to do with each other. The father of one of the first girls mentions she's a great one for taking shortcuts, and I wondered if the film is implying it's her own fault. The final woman appears to start enjoying the rape ordeal, which gives out some very disturbing messages. And near the end, the main cop says, "It's been a day, not good, but different," which seems to suggest nothing very shocking happened. As I said at the beginning, I found this to be very unpleasant and mean-spirited. I've not been able to find anything good to say about it, and I have no intention of watching it again. It would have been quite easy for a podcast to ignore this nasty little film, and quite understandable. So hats off to you guys for being completists and not shying away from it. One more thing, according to IMDb, only one of the main actors appeared in anything else. She's called Candy Sweet, which I'm guessing might not be her real name. She appeared in a film called Tortured Females as Girl in Bondage. And I think I'll leave it there.
We have had an email from our friend Andrew Roberts, Ractiesperus on Twitter, and he says, "Hi guys, it's Andy Roberts here. Wow, what a pair of clunkers it was this week. Possibly the most rapacious set of movies you've put together yet. So, with Scream for Vengeance first, how can this group of thugs be this rapey? The part where he's ogling over the blonde hostage is so squirm-inducing. Our heroine also wimps out at every opportune moment and has to be rescued by our mustachioed hero, who seems to be the only slightly redeemable character here. Only his only faux pas is suggesting fleeing on the railway lines, only to immediately contradict himself and get lost in the trees again. For all the criminal behaviour, our antagonists don't get much of the vengeance that I'd normally expect by the end. Although the pitchfork death wasn't too bad, I guess. There's nothing much else to say really, other than this was probably the most tricky film I've ever had to find. The version I did find had foreign subtitles burned in. On to Wrong Way. What in the name of cinema is this? It seems like a very loose adaptation of Last House on the Left that forgot to add the revenge section and the truly upsetting trauma. Instead, we have a string of rapes befalling a couple of vacuous girls that are set up to be titillating rather than harrowing, which is pretty despicable. It's not even well executed either. The acting, editing and sound quality are all woefully inept. There's a random rapist with disgustingly green buttocks. The girls are upset when their rapists leave them and then randomly strip to wash. I mean, the whole thing was shockingly bad, with a random unrelated section of yet more rape by different perpetrators that ends the film. What else can I say other than it was terribly produced, misogynistic trash? Here's hoping to less rapey, more bloody films next time, guys. Well, amen to that.
Hello, gentlemen. Well, this was a game of two halves, was it not? Firstly, Scream for Vengeance. Actually, really enjoyed this film. Yes, it was made for buttons and pocket lint, but it was really rather well done. On one hand, it was one of those cases where having shaky camera work and less than polished actors gave the whole thing a somewhat gritty and rather naturalistic feel. But also I thought it was a well-scripted little thriller, and the action sequences were rather nicely done, with both our heroes and the villains not displaying the usual invulnerability that movie characters have, i.e., if you get kicked in the balls, you're actually on the floor for a good while, and it bloody hurts. And while it wasn't reinventing the wheel, I did think it provided a good, hard-boiled little thriller story. However, while this is one of the more enjoyable movies of the recent crop, Wrong Way, on the other hand, well, it isn't just one of the worst movies I've seen recently. I think it might have took the coveted bottom spot of worst film I've actually ever seen. And I've seen Turkish Spider-Man. Now, if you visit the old IMDb, you can find various extreme film fans giving glowing reviews to truly debased and awful, awful films. However, it's very telling, I find, that if you go and look up Wrong Way, you find even the jaded connoisseurs of extreme cinema have very little good to say about it. And, may I say, rightly so. This has to be, I think, one of the most reprehensible films I've ever seen on every conceivable level. It's insultingly inept, it's insultingly scripted, insultingly acted. Everything about it is exploitation of the worst possible kind. There's really no fun to be had in it, and when the highlight of the movie is a cult leader who is clearly just a man wearing a dressing gown with a tie wrapped round his head in a subplot that goes nowhere, well, it's a very poor showing all round, I'm afraid. But in these days where all too often films that are just a bit mediocre are frequently vehemently decried as being the worst thing ever, I think it's very important people see utter cinematic dreck like this once in a while, just to remind you what a really, truly bad bit of filmmaking looks like. And that's the only real value I can find in something like Wrong Way, I'm afraid. An example of the absolute worst of cinema.
Alright, thank you very much for your feedback this week, guys. It seems like everybody pretty much agrees with us. When we talk about Jim Moon's feedback, first of all, Tom, he considers Wrong Way to be perhaps the worst film he has ever seen. I mean, that is something, isn't it?
It is, and I know that Jim's haven't followed him podcasting for years and listened to most of his stuff. He's seen a lot of shit over the years, so this really does mean quite a lot.
And unfortunately, we brought that to these people, Tom. And for that, I can only apologise to all of you if you had to sit through this. Any of you who did, I really sincerely apologise, because it's You know, I feel it in my heart. I know it was hard work, but he liked Scream for Vengeance quite a bit, and I think that's fair, absolutely fair.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, I can see it being, especially, well, I don't know which one you watch first, but after Wrong Way as well. You know, Scream for Vengeance would be quite refreshing, I think, after that.
I would imagine so. Although I watched it the other way around, unfortunately, Scream for Vengeance and then Wrong Way. We got some audio, of course, from Myron, good old Myron Schmidt, and he couldn't be bothered, could he? Really, Tom, to be honest with it, he really couldn't be bothered to get too far into either of these. I think he might have finished Wrong Way. He might have finished Scream for Vengeance, but it's interesting. He found one part in the film quite offensive, which is funny because all of Wrong Way is offensive. Never mind just one scene in Scream for Vengeance. It's the bit where, you know, the young girl there is who's been tied up in the house, sort of near the beginning of the movie. The guy is, you know, the guy with the knife is kind of playing around with her and trying to get her undressed and everything, and you don't really know how young she is, and he seemed to find that quite offensive, didn't he?
I think he turned them both off, but the thing we're finding out about old Myron is if he doesn't like a film, he'll just turn it off after about 10 minutes. He was the same with Headless Eyes last time, so fair enough. Why waste your life on shit films? So fair play to you, Myron.
Fair enough, Tom, but you do know that he's a big fan of Dario Argento's Dracula, don't you?
Is he?
Yeah!
Oh, wow. Bloody hell.
We also got some audio from Gore Blimey. Of course, our good friend Gore Blimey, at I am Gore Blimey, of course, on Twitter. He's changed his Twitter name recently. He's trying really to move on, Tom. He's trying to get out of my shadow. Now, Gore only watched one movie, which was Wrong Way, and he mentioned two interesting words there, unpleasant and mean-spirited. I think those words sum up the film quite well, I think.
Especially mean-spirited, you know, just so much hate behind a film like this. It doesn't really bear thinking about.
Yeah, but something he said there I think resonated with me is that he said that one of the girls, Candy Sweet, appeared in another film called Tortured Females as a character named Girl in Bondage, which kind of tells you everything you want to know, doesn't it?
And then we had one from our friend Andrew Roberts, and he said it was possibly the most rapacious set of movies we've put together yet. It's funny, isn't it, really? We're at a stage now where we don't know a lot of the movies we're putting together, and man, we just don't know what's going to come. I would never expected a film like Wrong Way to be in the list, and that's expecting some sleazy shit as well, but man, really opened my eyes.
Yeah, I think we've had about 4 of them in a row now, really, films in this style. But Wrong Way really, it takes the biscuit, I tell you. It really is. It's the lowest of the low, man. I'm telling you, it's the lowest of the low. And I'm quite happy. I hope. I haven't checked out the rest of the list really for a while to see what's coming up in the future. But I hope this is the last of the rape revenge-y stuff that we have to cover, because I'm done with it.
Yeah, I'm burned out with it, man. We need a bit of horror, something a bit pulpy, a bit light, and I think the stuff coming up next time might just do that. I kind of like the titles, so you never know.
Oh, Tom, good golly, Miss Molly, we're going to get to that in just a moment, but before we do, that's going to be the end of the show, isn't it? That's going to be the end of it. It's a short one this week.
That's right, but what can you really do with a couple of films like this? Even the good one was a bit forgettable, and the shit one was just something you don't really want to spend much time with.
Exactly. We don't have anything else to say, guys. That's the truth of it. But look, you heard the feedback section, and you're probably thinking, "Oh, I'd love to be part of that feedback montage, that lovely thing that Mr. Tom Elliott came up with." Yes, it was him. He's the one who designed it. If you'd like to be part of that montage, either in audio or email form, you can be. It's very simple to do it. Just send your feedback to us at feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. It's really that simple. Just send it on through. If it's an audio file, make it no more than about 4 minutes, if you please. If you send us an email, again, it doesn't have to be super short, but don't make it super long either, just so that we don't take up a whole big portion of our show reading it out. We would love to hear from you.
Absolutely, and have your feedback accompanied by that wonderful music by our friend Danny Davis. You can also get us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @StrangeDeadly, and I'm on as Grindhouse Tom, and you are?
I am the Chris Clayton on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd, which is LetterBoxd. They left the E out for some reason. The silly fools. But no, I love Letterboxd. It's a really nice little social network, basically for film lovers. You just go on there and say, I'd like to add this film, which I've watched recently, and perhaps I'll rate it, and perhaps I'll even review it. And it's just a nice, it's pleasant on there. Which is what I like, because I'm not really a social network sort of guy. I find it a bit irritating. There's a lot of people on there, reactionary twats, but that's a good one. So you can find us there, and we always love to hear from you. Of course we do. Now, Tom, you mentioned some fun-sounding movies on the next episode. Well, tell us about the movies and what's the theme.
Okay. Well, I hope I'm right. I hope I'm right, because I think we could do with a bit of sunshine. It's a theme about mad doctors, which sounds like a bit of fun. And the two films are Massacre Mansion, which is also known as The Terror of Dr. Cheney, and the other one is called Tomb of the Living Dead, also known as Mad Doctor of Blood Island. So a mad doctor's theme, which sounds like good pulpy fun, and let's hope it is.
I'm liking it. Have you seen either of these films, Tom?
No, completely new on me.
Same here.
Although Tomb of the Living Dead sounds familiar, so I don't know. Maybe I've seen them and just forgotten about that one, but we'll see.
We'll see. Well, until then, folks, thank you very much for listening. Thanks for all your support, for sending in your feedback, for listening, even if you have never gotten in contact with us before. Just thank you very much for listening and basically listening to us rant and chat about films that aren't very good, which is what we've been doing a lot lately. Hopefully we'll get some good ones soon, but until we do, I've been Chris Clayton.
And I'm Tom Elliott.
And we will see you on the next episode of this strange and deadly show. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Strange and Deadly Show, brought to you by Gentleman's Grindhouse Records, with me, Chris Clayton, and Tom Elliott. Thank you to Danny Davis for the music, and to Dark Ink 1 for the artwork. You can visit our website at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com.